Hello, Paul Bloom.
Hello,
of the
Robert
Small
Wright.
Potatoes newsletter.
Hello, Robert Wright of Non-Zero Podcast, the Non-Zero Corporation, the Non-Zero Industrial Complex.
And global media juggernaut, including the newsletter. How are you doing? Did you get a haircut, Paul?
I did.
Yeah.
Thank you for noticing. I did.
I did, but you didn't notice. But that's fine. I'm not bitter.
I was going to mention your
Our
haircut.
relationship's in really good shape, Paul.
You're very touchy today.
Sorry.
Yeah. That's okay.
Anyway, I got one. I think it looks great.
I think it looks great too.
Yeah.
It's very good. It's very flattering.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You know, you could go to trouble getting a haircut. You just go to the Zoom and you adjust the controls, and it just makes you look better. I'm waiting for full AI enhancement, where it kind of darkens your hair to the color you want, straightens one's nose, removes jowls.
I want it to transform me into another person altogether.
We're not far from that.
No, it can do that now, I think.
Yeah. Do you have another person in mind, or just a younger version of yourself?
I was thinking Jake Paul. My new hero.
Really?
No, not really. But we can talk about that.
I would have thought you were more of a Logan Paul man.
You know, I only recently became conversant in the distinction. Only when I decided to watch the Mike Tyson fight did I have to study up on the Paul clan.
So I was gonna watch the fight because at 8 p.m. That's fine. And
they said 8 p.m. They said 8 p.m.
And then I realized, okay, there's an undercard and everything, but it was gonna go till like 11:30, and that's really late. I went to bed.
I don't think the action got started until 11 or so.
Yeah,
actually, action is something that never got started in that fight. For about 12 seconds, it looked like Tyson might go after him, but after that, it was pretty much waltzing.
Let's defer that. Let's
defer this. Let's start with something lighter.
Lighter. Well,
yeah.
I'm not sure. This actually is light. Have you decided to make the move to Bluesky yet?
Move is a complicated word. Is that meant to imply leaving Twitter, or just establishing a beachhead for, just in case, and kind of spending some time on Bluesky? Which are you asking about?
So semantically, move does involve departing from one place and arriving at another. So it's we're using these verbs, these physical verbs, to express very abstract notions. Move is not the right question. I'm asking whether you're starting up in Bluesky, whether you're going to start posting on Bluesky, responding on Bluesky.
I think a little bit. I mean, for some time, the tweets about the podcast have been kind of replicated there from Twitter, but I wasn't spending time there. But now, I'm starting to. We should tell people to follow us. I notice you've already got a big lead on me. You've got like over 2,000 followers, and I'm trying to get into four figures myself. So people, if forced to choose between following you and me, not they have to, but I would go with me. It's at robertwriter.bsky.social. And
I don't even know. I'm Paul Bloom at Yale, something.
Even though you're not at Yale, I mean, Paul, at some point you got to give up this lie.
I can't. I have too much invested in it.
Paul, come on. You're living in the past.
I probably am.
Snap out of it.
Anyway, so I had a Bluesky account a while ago, maybe a couple of years ago, but I just haven't done anything with it. And nobody was there. And the people were there were just congratulating themselves, or my academic friends congratulating themselves. We're on Bluesky. This is great. We're out of this Twitter mess. And that's all they would say. But Twitter there's different things. One thing is I do disapprove of Elon Musk. And you described him on another podcast as an oligarch. And we are entering an oligarchy.
Oh, yeah. No ordinary. He's carrying oligarchy to unprecedented heights in America. I'm actually serious about that part, but go ahead.
Someone responded saying, what about JP Morgan?
Oh, yeah, that's Danny Bessner. He's always showing off his historical knowledge.
I was very impressed. I want to be the kind of guy who could come back with another historical oligarch.
It was a good comeback. Mm.
But so there's that. There's the fact that Twitter is toxic in many, many ways. One way is just that, the amount of disgusting stuff I get, not even politically And I think I'm partially to blame on it. You click on a few things, and then the algorithm learns it and assumes this is what you want. So too many, people beating up other people, and too many, attractive women being attractive, and and I just want to learn stuff and keeping track of my colleagues. So in some way, it's too damn addictive for me.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I thought Bluesky would be sort of a more left-leaning thing and kind of mix up the politics a bit.
Mix up the politics?
I have
homogenize the politics.
So you tell me. So what is driving you to go to Bluesky?
Well, I mean, first of all, I noticed. Did you notice this? Beginning after the election, I started losing followers in pretty large numbers. I've lost close to 2,000 followers, and people say, I mean, I've got several theories. My reputation's finally catching up with me. I like to think that's not it. It's a bot, Elon went on a bot killing spree. I think he's too distracted to do that. And I don't think he delegates that kind of authority, but who knows?
Natalie Trump won the election. All the Russian bots have gone home.
That could be it. They relocated to the Crimea for a little R&R. What else? Oh yeah, it was everybody going to Bluesky.
Yeah.
But the thing, the reason I was reluctant to embrace that hypothesis is because that would mean they were not only like going to Bluesky the way I am, they were moving, they were burning their boats, right?
Yeah.
Because they were closing their accounts out. But some other people who fit certain kinds of profiles, not everyone reports this, but some other people do. You have not noticed it?
Have moved to Bluesky and left?
No, have you losing your followers?
I haven't, but let me tell you something. I have, so this is a boast, but also I'll take it away, but I have 95,000 followers. So this to me is a fair amount of followers, cultivate over here for my witty retweets, my occasional beefs and so on.
Uh-huh.
I had 95,000 followers about 4 years ago. Nothing's changed. It just stopped. 3 years ago, 2 years ago, whatever, it stopped. It's not changing at all. So I haven't noticed a drop, but I think the system's broken or something. It doesn't.
Well, I think it's almost for some reason the algorithm's been changed in a way that makes it almost impossible to pick up followers. I think. I mean, I quit. It only happened a few months ago to me, I think, but it did happen. But then they started dropping. Now, there has been this well-known change in the algorithm, kind of the TikTokization of Twitter. This gets back to why people are leaving. I'm not leaving because I can't stand the Trumpists. In fact, this is why I will probably never leave entirely. I want to stay in touch with my ideological adversaries is too strong a word, but you know what I mean.
That cognitive empathy isn't going to work by itself. You got to kind of exercise it.
No, it's you got to feed it the fuel. And in general, ideological diversity.
Yeah.
Also, there's a couple of areas of discourse that I try to stay in touch with. AI, because I'm writing a book on it. Foreign policy, because I write about it a lot. Where it remains the case for the time being that I think most of the people you'd want to stay plugged into are on Twitter. However, I will say, I discovered something on Bluesky only yesterday, which is that someone had very conveniently posted just a few lists of people on Bluesky in different areas, and one of them was AI. And I realized, you can assemble a list, and I actually make use of lists. I don't know if you do, but the list function on Twitter, it's great. It's great because you just escape the algorithm entirely. It's just whoever you put on the list, it's usually a subject matter list, and the tweets appear in the order in which they happened in real time. And also, you kind of don't feel like you can engage. If you try, it probably won't work because most of the people aren't following you. So it's like you can say something, but you won't see an answer show up on the list. So anyway, I'm optimistic about that, using that to populate, to decide who to follow and who to put on lists on Bluesky, and so on. I worry about the ideological homogeneity. I'm wondering if there's a way I doubt there is a way to change that. Right.
It's extremely homogeneous. So this is maybe worth talking about for its own right, but the editor of Scientific American, Laura Helmuth, has just resigned after saying, among other things. But what catalyzed the resignation was a series of posts she put on Bluesky about after the election, basically very angry, a lot of swearing about the Trump election and everything. I forget the exact words, but I feel
hey, I've got the exact words.
Go
you want to
ahead.
hear some things she said on Bluesky? And I think I know where you're going with this in emphasizing that it was on Bluesky. She says, every 4 years, I remember why I left Indiana. Now, she said this right in the aftermath of the election. She was not in a good place emotionally. Every 4 years, I remember why I left Indiana, where I grew up, and remember why I respect the people who stayed and are trying to make it less racist and sexist. The moral arc of the universe isn't going to bend itself. Now, if I were her and I were attacked for that one, and I'll get on to one or two others, I would point out she's not saying all Trump followers are racist and sexist.
No.
She's saying those who are racist and sexist are
Trump followers.
Yeah, are Trump followers. There's somewhere where she talked about them. Oh, it's the next one where she depicts them as celebrating. And she could have the same... this is actually I meant that comment to apply to this. She says, quote, solidarity to everybody whose meanest, dumbest, most bigoted high school classmates are celebrating early results because fuck them to the moon and back. That's where I was going to say, she's not saying all Trump supporters are mean, dumb, and bigoted, but she's saying there are some and they're celebrating. Finally, she says, I apologize to younger voters that my Gen X is so full of fucking fascists. So, yes, she is the editor of Scientific American. They had departed from tradition and endorsed a candidate both 4 years ago and this year, a Democrat. So, anyway, go ahead. That's the
background. There's stuff to be said about this, but one thing is just the reaction. Her thing got copied onto Twitter. And the response was outrage, mockery. She deserves to lose her job. Elon Musk, of course, who seems to have infinite time for this, reposted it. And
he weighed in. Now, that's abuse of power, but I digress. Go ahead.
It's a good digression. I mean, he weighs in a lot of things, including retweeting the most, or reposting, whatever it is, retweeting, I guess, the most bizarre conspiracy theories and bullshit lies and everything. But the response to her on Twitter was in my timeline, my feed was rage and disgust, and this woman should lose her job and a lot of heavy duty stuff. On Bluesky, I looked at her and person after person, you are so brave. It is horrible you lost your long string of respondents, no criticism at all.
Well, see, and what I'm going to wonder is whether had she been on Twitter, and I don't know that she had left Twitter totally, but let's assume she was just on Bluesky. Had she been on Twitter, would she have said those things exactly? Or would she have been more conscious of the fact that she wasn't just preaching to the choir?
Some people like having a shitstorm around her remarks. And if so, she would have posted around Twitter. I got the sense that she mentioned at some point, well, this is my private account. I don't think she expected it to go viral the way it did. And I have no knowledge at all for why she resigned. Did she fall or was she pushed? But the virality of it couldn't have helped. But anyway, it's a perfect example. I think one problem with Twitter has its problems, but there's still a lot of real give and take. I have some very strong, powerful left-wing friends on Twitter who post big fights and everything. Bluesky seems to be perfectly homogeneously far left and woke.
Far left? No, not far left.
Well, not regarding foreign policy. But regarding,
exactly.
Regarding
That's
like
my
this.
example. I mean, I may be an interesting test case.
Yeah, foreign policy is complicated.
Spending more time there because I'm probably out of whatever the mainstream on foreign policy is there. And I'm not, it isn't, only half of my foreign policy is left. I mean, only half of the part that will get me in trouble is left. Half of it transcends ideological bounds. Anyway, I digress.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting question about foreign policy and how that maps onto categories of left, right, and woke, non-woke. And since Trump, it's gotten very complicated. It's not obvious.
Well, he brought to the fore a long-standing strand of conservative foreign policy thought that had been represented by Pat Buchanan and I guess Senator Taft in the 50s and so on, maybe.
That's right. But if you went back 20 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, and you said, there's a president arguing for a muscular response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. What party is the president? I don't think anybody would say, Democrat. And there's a president who wants to abandon our commitment to NATO, whatever. So putting aside the sort of social media reaction, I do think that the editor of SciAm is very much in the wrong. And I think that the fact that high-profile scientific journals, I think Nature is doing endorsement. I think that that's wrong too.
Yeah, of course, Scientific American is technically, it is a popular magazine.
Yeah.
Now, historically, and younger folk won't remember this, it was a unique kind of popular science magazine. It featured these pretty dense articles, typically written by the scientists or by the experts, and then heavily edited to questionable effect in terms of their accessibility sometimes, but I will leave that aside. It was incredibly thick. I mean, it was really an important institution. It was incredibly thick because it sold so many ads. It had not a huge readership, but a very valued kind of intellectually elite, I guess, readership. And it was an important institution. And I will say it always had a little bit of an ideology on issues of like nuclear proliferation and so on. It was much more interested in amplifying the voices of people who would have been on my side of the arguments, associated with the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists or whatever. These people who wanted to see arms control but over the last few years, it got, well, let's just say political in a different, and in some ways less mainstream way, and to some extent a woke way. I mean, I remember they wrote something about E.O. Wilson that was kind of out there. It was kind of out there. Yeah. It was not, it was not even in touch with just the facts of the case, really. It was just
right after E.O. Wilson died. Yeah. They basically had, I forget what article was titled, but basically it should have been titled E.O. Wilson was a racist.
Yeah, which fine. You can, I mean, there's things you can adduce, if you want to make that case. I'm not saying it just didn't seem even a well-informed version of that argument. And I'm not saying he was a racist. I knew him, a little bit, and I never saw any signs that he was. But, maybe you can, if you dig through his writings. We discussed this in a overtime a few weeks ago. I think I came across a different version of the argument. Had a couple of things I hadn't seen. Kind of interesting. Anyway, it's it got pretty woke. It got more overtly ideological probably than it had ever been. Then again, what hasn't? I mean, I don't think it moved any further toward overt ideology than the New York Times' supposedly reportorial coverage has.
There's somebody's law, I forget who it is, that it's for our times, any organization that's not explicitly conservative will gradually move left over time. So if you have like a knitting club on Facebook, it'll be a lot of, fuck Trump and arguing for trans issues.
But that hasn't been happening to enough knitting clubs, Paul. I mean, I think, hasn't it been moving in the other direction? I mean, before the election, I was in Austin, Texas, a little conference, and a guy there who's in the tech world said that lately people he knew had been, in conversation with him just saying, I'm MAGA now. Just like an official declaration. I'm out of the closet. I don't know if they were out of the closet or they had only just decided or what, but I think left, although Trump's kind of ideologically ambiguous. I mean, and in fact, the big question this time as last time is, will he embrace more of a left-wing populism as, preached by people like Steve Bannon? But we digress. I will say the Bluesky thing is more of a real thing than it's been generally in the past. There has been a genuine, it isn't just my follower count. Bluesky has experienced genuine growth. It's still an order of magnitude away from Twitter, but there's a lot of talk about how this is happening.
A lot of people move to Bluesky or maybe not move, but set up camp in Bluesky.
I just wish they would try to develop an ethos of, being open to argument from viewpoints they hate and engaging them civilly, but I guess there's no way to turn it into that unless...
I do not think they have that ethos.
It's just such a shame. I mean, maybe I'll try to stir up the pot and like tell them, share some of my foreign policy views with them, and be just annoyingly civil about the whole thing and see how they respond.
Do you think Twitter X will connect up with True Social?
It's a good question. By the way, as a counterpart thing, this is more in the technical realm, but Bluesky is set up in such a way that it can do some kind of merger isn't the word, but it can become kind of networked with all of the Mastodon stuff because they are both, there's a technical protocol. It seems like two relevant words are Fediverse and ActivityPub, but I may be wrong about both of those. I don't know. But anyway, Bluesky is going to, I think it says that before terribly long, they're going to be able to open the gates. And at that point, if you're on Bluesky, I think you'd be able to, your tweets could go out to Mastodon and stuff. I'm not sure. Or skeets, as they call them on Bluesky. But that doesn't solve the ideological problem.
By the way, when Bluesky emerged, Musk, one of the reasons why Musk wouldn't allow links to it on his site was he said they stole the entire Twitter thing. And I'm just not an expert here, but it sure looks like they stole the entire Twitter thing. It looks identical to Twitter.
Oh, it is identical to Twitter, but you can't, isn't there a famous case saying you can't patent or copyright or whatever, look and feel? That's the phrase in the court case.
It's something to do with the Amazon shopping cart, I think, that other places started using the shopping cart and Amazon tried to sue. And
may have been that.
But so I'm not saying an illegal point, but man, they ripped off Twitter. But
it was started with the very active involvement of Jack Dorsey, who had come from Twitter, who had been the
I had known that. Okay, yeah. I had known that.
He's no longer associated with it. No, he was more than anyone else the person who started it, I think.
I didn't know that. Okay. Accusation rescinded. So True Social.
True Social. Could be. I mean, it's an independent entity, so you'd have to do some actual paperwork and money would have to change hands, I guess. But, I mean, this is where the corruption comes in, right? Like Musk, Trump, it could just, whatever happens, it could be part of some larger deal where instead of money changing hands, one of them does, Trump does a political favor or the other way around. Who knows? It's just also...
I mean, the question with the Elon Musk, Donald Trump relationship, one of the questions is, when will it disintegrate? And Trump ultimately decide to have Musk killed. And I wonder whether True Social, I wonder at one point they're sitting together and Trump puts his arm around him and says, I want you to merge Twitter with True Social. We'll just call it True Social X. And Musk looks like, fuck, I have billions of dollars in that company and this is going to destroy me. And that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, well, I'm glad he reacted that way. I think True Social is not exactly the infusion Twitter most needs right now.
No, but it might be it might be really good for True Social.
True Social probably needs something. But by the way, one other super annoying thing Musk did is, I mean, first, being the petty little jerk he is, he, of course, derogated links to Substack. Because when Substack started its notes thing, which looks a lot less like Twitter than Bluesky, Musk is like, well, I guess he accused them of like stealing the idea, but also in some way stealing followers, doing something he thought was not above board, but it wasn't anything illegal because he didn't sue. Anyway, he got all pissed off and made it so that if you put a link to your newsletter, Substack newsletter, in a tweet, it will go nowhere. It was really derogated by the algorithm. Then it got worse. He now derogates all URLs because he's jealous of traffic going elsewhere. And that just makes Twitter a much less useful place. It's a much harder place to have a conversation about the larger conversation at, right? Because you can't just throw in the New York Times link and then make it easy for people to click on that, glance on it, know what you're talking about, and discuss it with you. So that's why everybody's using screenshots on Twitter now, because URLs are punished.
Yeah, I do that for when I have a new Substack. I say, here it is, and I take a picture of it, and I put it up, and then have another link. Probably the link destroys the whole thread. But sometimes I think Elon Musk is not a free speech champion that many people would have hoped.
Are you trolling me?
Yeah.
I think there is just the definitive example. I'm sorry to repeat this, but before the election, a document that leaked from the Trump campaign, totally legit journalism, exactly the kind of document that's traditionally linked to journalists, reported on in newspapers, blah, 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 and Elon shut it down. He didn't let it circulate on Twitter. Forevermore, anyone who says he's a free speech advocate with a straight look on their face should be laughed out of the room and then killed. No. Just laughed out of the room. Just laughed out of the room.
Just laughed out of the room.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the moment when Musk took over Twitter, I viewed him in some way as a free speech guy. He talked to free speech talk. He had legitimate complaints against the old Twitter regarding the suppression of certain bits of news and everything. But boy, that was wrong. This guy has a censor's soul. I mean, even in all sorts of ways, including like wanting to punish. I think this falls roughly on the rubric of free speech, wanting to somehow legally punish advertisers who no longer advertise on Twitter.
No, he's just. I don't know if the deal is he's one of these people who's incapable of getting out of himself and taking, anything like an objective view of himself and really asking the question of like, wait, are there these universal rules that I'm willing to comply by and I'm asking everyone else to comply by, which is, of course, the essence of a moral or legal system.
Yeah.
You just sense not that he thinks whatever is in his interest is just the right thing, and he deludes himself into thinking it's justified by some larger principle.
I don't think he properly takes the point of view of the universe. As Peter Singer, Bentham, somebody.
It was. It actually wasn't. It was a different Scottish philosopher. Maybe his name will occur to me. A slight more obscure than Bentham, but yes, the point of view of the universe. And Peter quotes him a lot. Which is the ideal. I mean, that's enlightenment. This is if I could get all the way to the point of view of the universe, I would be enlightened.
That is enlightenment.
I may be closer than Musk is to that.
It's a free country. If Musk bought Twitter, if he wants to use it as an instrument to forward his political viewpoints in case the election of Donald Trump. In some way, he has a right to do it. The hypocrisy is his endless discussions how Twitter is sort of a politically neutral, let every voice speak, blah 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 blah.
Yeah,
stuff, and it's awful. But let me jump back to something about the Scientific American thing. One thing that fits my intuition, which I think is the worry about these endorsements, is the study done by Corey Clark and a bunch of her colleagues. What they did was they got a lot of people. And they asked about various institutions, the Supreme Court, universities, the Army, and then they asked them, how politically biased do you think they are? And in what direction, left or right? And people gave responses. And then they asked them, maybe a different group of people, how much do you trust these institutions? And it turns out that the more you think an institution is politically biased, the less you trust it. And the interesting fact is, even if it's in your own direction. So if you're a Trumpian conservative and you think the Supreme Court leans right wing, you trust it less. You trust their decision less, even though they're on your side. Because people are smart enough to see that these biases corrode things. And for that reason, even though I think these endorsements, they have all sorts of bad effects, but among other things, they erode trust in the sources. And I think more generally, they erode trust in science.
Yeah. I mean, an asterisk on that study. A question is, are people good at sensing actual bias in the first place? So in other words, the things that they see as unbiased and therefore trust are actually probably biased in their direction. I would submit. But
I bet there's a default.
Yeah. No, that was one thing I thought is like, does she really think that by endorsing candidates, she's helping her cause? No, she'd be much better off convincing people that Scientific American is an objective source, and then sneaking the ideology in the way the old Scientific American did by choosing like which nuclear weapons analyst to publish.
Yeah.
But whatever. Anyway, She looked nice. There was a picture of her. I felt sorry for her.
Yeah, I felt sorry for her too. I think maybe I'm writing something on humiliation and cancellation and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so far, I've come to the conclusion that is awful. And but I'll have more to say.
You're coming out against humiliation? That's the thing. See, that's why you have so many followers, is you just take those controversial stands. You're Canadian. You're like, fuck you. That's the way Canadians are, right?
Notoriously. Our polite exterior hides this sadistic,
it's like you're being real nice, and all of a sudden, I don't approve of humiliation. You're like, whoa, I just got to reorient myself here. Whoa.
Anyhow, I will have more to say about this, but to shift things, and we're two guys here. Mm-hmm. So, did you see the fight?
Did I see the fight?
Fight?
Quickly, I want to say a few kind words about Elon Musk. Actually, I'll save them for overtime. He could have a constructive effect on the Trump administration, and notwithstanding the fact that he's carrying oligarchy to new and terrifying heights. But
very
I'll
interesting.
do that in overtime.
Only I say the kind words about Elon Musk. I do think Elon Musk is in many ways a brilliant person, a genius, and I've endless respect for successfully running many companies that do it. But so I mean, you are more reticent in your praise of the man. So all the more reason to stay here till overtime.
All the more. And there's so many reasons. So the fight, yeah. First of all, did you see the video that circulated a few days before the fight of Mike Tyson being interviewed by that schoolgirl?
Yes.
Oh my God, that was so funny. So first of all, for people who don't know Mike Tyson, he's a guy, you're always getting the real Mike. Okay?
Yeah. The
plain, unvarnished, actual view of the real Mike. He follows his impulses. One time during a fight, he bit a guy's ear off. I don't know if he actually severed any of it, but, he bit his ear. I think was it Evander Holyfield? What?
Yes, their rematch. Yes. I think he actually severed the ear.
Yeah. So he felt like doing it. He did it. I mean, you get the real Mike. And so this girl, I mean, I know you saw it, but if anybody didn't, she's been sent by her school. I don't know. I guess she's 12 or 13 or something. And she's, do you have any, school kids, kids my age are wondering well, what do you think this will do for your legacy or something like that? And right away, he's like, legacy is just a word. It's just a word for ego. And then he's like, I'm going to die. You think, I'm going to die. And then he's like, we're all dead. We're all going to die. We're all dust. And it's like this little girl has just been hit by this infusion of existential dread. And she just stays in character and says, well, thank you. I've never heard that answer to that question. And then he goes on, it's like, nobody give a fuck about me after I die. Maybe my kids. It was great.
It was really great. I can see it would appeal to the Buddhist in you.
Kind of. Well, yeah. I mean, it was heavy. I mean, he's an interesting guy. He's a genuinely interesting guy.
Yeah.
But the fight, what did you think of the fight?
I saw the fight, and it was people said that it was faked, that there was some sort of, and I don't think that that's exactly true, but there was I think there was some extent staged. Anyway, I was worried he was going to get killed, perhaps literally. And no, he didn't. He just got, I would say humiliated, but I don't think he felt that way. I don't think people thought it would. But
they reported $20 million he got may take the sting out of that.
Yes. And it was 60 million people saw it. It was an enormously popular, most popular thing Netflix ever did. But it was just, he's what, 58?
58. I mean, that's why I was hopeless. People on Twitter, I was arguing with people. They're like, no, he can do it. I'm like, dude, I've been 58. Let me tell you something.
Yeah.
A half-decent boxer who's half his age will not have any trouble, and he didn't have any trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. And there was something in the New York Times, I forget who wrote this, saying that this sort of shit's bad for boxing. The boxing is this, whatever you think of it, and people have opinions, but it's a serious sport. And these stunt matches between, a famous YouTuber and a 58-year-old, champion, they're just ridiculous. And the fact that people watch it is going to mean there's going to be more of it.
Yeah. So Jake Paul, I was dimly aware of him. So if anybody didn't follow this, he's a guy who was a YouTube influencer, and I guess his brother Logan is what, a wrestler or what? Is he a martial arts, a real martial arts guy, like one of these fake wrestling guys, or what?
I thought he's another YouTuber.
Well, yeah, but he also does. So I guess this guy used his influence, and he's a big guy who I think can pack a punch. I mean, he kind of knows what he's doing in the ring.
But apparently his fights have been with martial arts people who do other things, and
right. But so he lined this thing up and managed to make a shitload of money himself. And as for, it was not fixed. It wasn't fake in the sense of fixed. What happened? I think both of them went out thinking, it was not certain. And I'm sure Jake Paul thought there's a chance that Tyson will land a punch. And in the first round, Tyson kind of went after him and tried. But
I guess there's an alternative reality where Tyson lands a punch in the first round and just knocks him flat out.
It could happen. I mean, he had a hurt leg. He was wearing a knee brace, and it's harder to get power if your legs aren't working. But, then it became, by halfway through the fight, it was clear that Paul was ahead on points. And first of all, the smart thing to do at that point is just box. Just keep landing more punches than he's landing. Don't go in where you could get hurt.
Yeah.
And if I had been him, when they asked him, were you trying to knock him out? That's what I would have said. But that's not what he said. He said, well, it's trying to hurt him a little. So he kind of made it sound like it was fixed.
Yeah.
I don't think it was fixed per se, but yeah, I think the last few rounds, certainly, they were just waltzing. And, it wasn't very interesting.
I saw a bit of the fights preceding it, and some of them were pretty good.
Oh, my God. Those were brutal.
Yeah.
Those two women?
Those were serious. The two of them, that was serious fighting.
Shit. And then the one before that. I'm so ashamed that I didn't watch all of them. I didn't waste all that time. But by the way, I mean, the Tyson fight, in olden times, when I was a kid, heavyweight fights would be 12 or even 15 rounds.
Yeah.
And 3 minutes each.
Yep.
That's 45 minutes.
These were 8 2-minute rounds?
8 2-minute rounds is 16 minutes total.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you get tired.
Oh, yeah.
I don't care how much you train. You're that age, you get tired. And also he had this horrible health thing, like not so long ago. Tyson
an ulcer,
throwing up blood and just kind of. Yeah.
But anyway, he was a great one. I mean, look, give him credit. Did your body look like that at 58?
No.
Maybe you're not. That was a very recent for you.
Apparently, the Netflix thing, the streaming connection did it work for you? For some people, it did not work well.
Well, I kind of watched the fight the next day, so it probably was irrelevant.
So when people were watching it live, it froze up and kind of glitched, and then it kind of suddenly went on again.
Yeah.
And on a scene where Tyson's being interviewed in the locker room beforehand, and he's kind of bottomless, so it just kind of zoomed in on his ass, and that's what people saw when he flipped it. So
really,
he's a man in good shape.
And that was it. That's the point. You knew
that's where I'm going with that.
You said, "Man, that's some firm buns there."
That's really well,
No, but I mean, his upper body is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
That guy. I think he was the youngest champion in history. He was just a tank.
Yeah.
He would just wade in and wail, and it was like, dude, you should not be in the same ring with that guy. What are you thinking? Get out of there.
Yeah, and he could probably take each of us pretty easily.
You think he could beat you?
I think. I got some moves. I'm fast. I'm fast and tricky. But
you're known for that. You're known for that. Yeah.
But
Canadian fight circles.
That's right. That's right.
So, what is it? Overtime time or what? Were there other major? I mean, we got to save our best stuff for overtime. We always do our best. Wouldn't you say we always do our best stuff in overtime?
I think some of our great stuff is before overtime, but maybe the idea is overtime is consistently great.
Yeah. I could talk. Well, I should say I just posted a piece, and by the time this is posted, I'll have posted this piece in the Non-Zero newsletter on AI surrendering to the military-industrial complex.
Do you want to say so? We can say this for overtime, but you are writing a book on AI. I've been talking about this for a while. And been reluctant to say much about the book. But maybe this has ended. Maybe you will now tell us a little bit about the book.
I'm writing it. And yeah, I'm writing it. How's that?
Thank you. That's really helpful. You were reluctant before, but now I know
cosmic. I'll say I'm working hard to convey to people how momentous this is. And I think one way I'm trying to do that is to explain kind of how it works, which I think people really don't understand. And I think, it kind of, I think it is so momentous. And so many people in the business agree, and they have different views on what to do about that. And one view is that it means you should be a real China hawk, which is the opposite of my view. But there is a view in the industry, and this is relevant to the piece in Non-Zero, that once you get to artificial general intelligence, which is a vaguely defined thing at best, and I don't know why everyone talks about it as if it's this binary threshold thing, almost everybody. But the idea is once you get there, or shortly thereafter, you get this intelligence explosion, and you get this takeoff towards superintelligence.
Yeah.
And so one view is, well, whichever country gets there first rules the world, so we better get there first. And this is part of the logic behind the the China chip ban, the ban on the import restrictions on high performance chips. But one thing I document in the piece is that the head of Anthropic is he's more of a China hawk than anyone might have guessed. And that accounts, I think that helps explain why Anthropic just kind of recently officially crossed the line into doing business with the Pentagon. So did Meta, all this within the last few weeks. And it's surprising in the case of Anthropic. I don't know how much you know about them, but they're thought of as this very high-minded, and I think people tend to think of them as kind of maybe left-leaning, but that's probably not right. I mean, it was founded by...
Is that Claude?
Are they what?
Is it someone that creates Claude, the AI?
Yes, they don't pronounce it that way, but the Canadians sure. There do, but the others pronounce it Claude. Yeah, they make Claude. It's they're one of the big three. Yeah. There's OpenAI, there's them, and there's Google in terms of proprietary models. And then Meta makes a pretty strong open source model, but not as strong as those three. And, but Anthropic was founded by, the CEO, Dario Amodei, I'm not sure if that's the right pronunciation of his last name, but they were at OpenAI, and he more than anyone is responsible for GPT bursting on the scene because he was the one who believed in the scaling laws. And I think it's GPT-3 that he created. And at that point, it was clear that it was the right path. And then around that time, he and some other people at OpenAI who thought that Sam Altman was not taking safety seriously enough, they left to create a company that was going to take safety more seriously, Anthropic. And that's why, the kind of do no evil idea had some people expecting that they'd be the last ones to get in bed with the Pentagon and say, sure, you can use our large language model, but they're doing that.
And you disapprove?
Oh, I more disapprove of the worldview that is motivating him to do that, which is this extreme, I would say,
zero sum.
Well, yeah, it is zero sum, but it's a view that I wouldn't say it's quite China-phobic, but there is a problem that the whole AI industry has an incentive to make us all fear China. Leave aside their involvement with the Pentagon, like they just when they want to lobby for anything, we need more nuclear power plants. We need looser regulation. They always say, and this is a fairly recent development, but it was inevitable because rhetorically it's so effective. They always say, we got to fend off the Chinese threat. You can't regulate us. You can't do this. You can't do that because of China.
Yeah.
And, and this whole chip war, which is just obviously reduces China's disincentive to invade Taiwan because they're no longer getting high performance chips out of the foundry there, which is the world's highest performing chips are made there. Invasion makes only more sense from their point of view because they no longer give a shit if the factories are blown up because that's a win for them because we're the only ones getting the best performing chips out of those factories. I mean, China still gets some chips, but still on balance, who's hurt more? If there's a war and everything gets blown up, the West gets hurt more now because of Biden's chip war on China, okay? He created this situation where the disincentive to invade China is reduced.
Yeah.
And Amodai, this, he supports the chip war.
So put aside the chip war.
Yeah.
Do you think it's irrational to worry that China will get a lead in AI development?
I personally think that if you understand the explosiveness of the technology and the various ways it could go awry, and the way that becomes only more likely in an arms race environment of fear and opaqueness as opposed to transparency, internationally, I mean, I think you should conclude that we should work very, very hard to be on the same page, get together with China and try to handle this threat to, I mean, it has a lot of potential upside. It's just that it could go awry in a billion ways. And, it reminds you of that movie, Don't Look Up. That was a metaphor for climate change, but it could have been a metaphor for AI. It's like, we still don't get it, that it's in the interest of the people of the world to unite. And some people get it. Ilya Sutskever has said this exact same thing. And he is like this total AI genius guy, of course, who was also at OpenAI.
So is this what your book is about?
Well, it's one of the take-homes.
Your book it develops the theme that AI is of extraordinary significance and is gonna become more important as time goes by. So you're pushing back against some people, my friend Gary Marcus and others, who say that kind of getting diminishing returns now.
That's a separate issue. I think Gary doesn't. I had him on my podcast. Doesn't really appreciate the power, the unfolding power of it. But the question of diminishing returns, of scaling per se, of just that part of it, like just more power, more text being fed into it, more computing power, more text. No, that may be. There's a lot of talk now about how maybe scaling has plateaued.
Yeah.
But that's just not going to be the end of progress by any means.
So what's your book about?
Well, for that, Paul, we'll have to go into overtime. No,
we couldn't have done it better if we had rehearsed it.
Yeah, no, I'm sure this will double the revenue, Paul. But we can say that if they're annoyed at me for being so crassly, and I'm not being crassly commercial about, I mean, I'm a little reluctant. What is people have different philosophies about this, like talking too much about books too far in advance. I mean, this is going to come out, I think, in around August. But what is your philosophy on books? Some people just don't talk about them at all. They're afraid they'll get scooped.
I talk about them all the time as I'm writing them.
Yeah.
And at one point, my agent got mad at me and said, I saw your tweets about this and everything. Why are you doing this? Book's not published yet.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. Maybe I don't have the sort of enduring yet original ideas that you have. I just talk about stuff. I don't worry people stealing it.
Yeah.
Do you have a title?
I do, but I'm not going to. That's probably out there somewhere on the web. But I'm
going to Google it and I'm going to put it on Twitter and Bluesky.
Wow, both? That's pretty brutal.
And Bluesky too. So Anyway, so yeah, okay. So we'll talk a little bit more about it in overtime.
Yeah, and it actually may not be coming out in August. Who knows? I may be wrong about that.
Well, it's a bit less than if you.
Well, you might ask if I'm not done with it yet. How could it? Right, by traditional publishing cycles, right?
Does it take a good draft to publication is like a year? Good.
Yeah. That has been the standard cycle. Now they can do it faster, and they sometimes do it faster, but they used to prefer that. Of course, then things happened, like the internet, and things accelerated. Yeah. But in olden times, yes, that was what they said. We need the manuscript a year before pub.
Do you worry? This is what I would worry about. Do you worry about the dangers of writing about AI, which is such a fast-moving topic, that things you might say become obsolete, pretty quickly or something like that?
Not especially. I mean, if I thought I was just fundamentally wrong about the amount of power that is going to be unleashed, and the but I don't think.
So you're gambling on being prophetic, where your book comes out and then people say, "Oh my God, he got it exactly right."
Yeah, I think the trend lines are pretty clear. The exact time frame's not clear. People argue about, well, will whatever AGI is be reached in, a lot of people in the business are saying like 2026, 2027. Other people say later. But again, it's a fuzzy concept, AGI. There just aren't. I don't think there are many people deeply involved in the business who don't think that there's going to be, over some time scale, breathtaking progress.
Yeah.
In other words, just like shit that most people are still not imagining.
I'll say that even if we've peaked out, that this is as good as it's going to get, this is astonishing. It's astonishing.
Well, and people,
in ways that I think people fail to fully appreciate, fail to fully use. But I use Claude more and more these days for all sorts of things. Just ask it questions, and sometimes it bombs, sometimes it gives a bad answer, but sometimes I'm startled by how sharp it is.
Yeah. Well, we can talk about that in overtime, because I don't think I'm being that creative in my use of it, actually. Maybe you can give me some tips. Anyway, to get to overtime, people can become paid subscribers either to Small Potatoes or to Non-Zero.
We should do something where they can become subscribers to both somehow.
Well, what we can do easily is we do this with American Prestige when we do a joint podcast, is at the part of the post. Anyway, a paid subscriber to either can get like a discount to the other.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
You have many more subscribers, so this will work to my benefit. This is my clever.
Yeah, we will work. We will work on that, and we could try to work it in this time. But anyway, look, it's been like an hour almost. We should go while there's still people here to get out their credit cards.
Okay.
Not that we're that mercenary or transactional about it, but
okay.
So that either Non-Zero or Small Potatoes gets you access to the rest of this, and the that great feeling you get when you know you're supporting a good cause, right, Paul?
The warmth you get when helping.
It's a kind of warmth.
Two older men support their lifestyles.
Yeah, we could die at any moment. I'm a lot older than I could die at any moment. And people are withholding money from me.
Worry. Yeah.
I just don't know how they're going to handle the guilt. Should that happen, God forbid. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
With that, folks.
So we're now in the overtime section.
Thanks to everybody. We're heading into overtime, and